Today on the Modern Motherhood Podcast from AllMomDoes, I'm your host, Julie Lyles Carr, and, I want to raise kids who have good manners and get good grades and all those things, right? But wow, what if I expanded my vision a little and I decided that I wanted to raise world changers? Wow. What does that sound like to you? What does that mean? Well, today, my guest, Kristen Welch, she is going to be on talking to us about just that. She is a mom, an author. She runs a global nonprofit. You're really going to want to hear her story and what she has learned along the way about raising grateful kids, kids who are leaders, kids who are wanting to make this world a better place. We welcome Kristen Welch. Kristen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here today.
So tell me a little bit about you, about your family, your husband, your kiddos. What's all that like?
Well, we are just your average busy, messy family here in Texas. I've been married for 23 years. I have 3 kids, one that is just about to leave for college this fall. And then I have a son who's turning 16 soon, so he's learning to drive and all that fun stuff. Yeah. And then our youngest is 11, so 2 girls and 1 boy, and a very big, fluffy golden doodle. So that's kind of our little family unit.
Now, you have been blogging for quite a while now, and what pulled you into the blogging world, that online platform?
Yeah, I always think of blogging like dog years. It's multiplied. So I'm a very old dog. I think I've been blogging. This is starting my 11th year. And I had a newborn at home, my 3rd. She was actually born premature, and we didn't leave the house for very often for the first 4 or 5 months of her life. She had medical conditions and on a heart monitor, so it was just hard to leave the house. And I've always been a writer, more for myself than anyone else, but I started blogging during that time, more as an outlet. And I was just a lonely mom at home and needed some community, and so it definitely filled that need.
That's so interesting because I've been blogging about the same amount of time and sort of the same scenario in that I had newborn twins, and we had just moved to the city we're in now 5 weeks before they were born. They were born in 2007. And so blogging for me, same kind of thing, a great place to express writing, which I love, but also to have that community in a season that did feel very lonely. And believe me, taking 8 kids to Costco, that was our big outing. That was about all that we did. So
Wow.
It's fascinating, this generation of writers that I'm meeting who, it all began with that blogging platform. So what did you learn through your blogging years about a community of moms? What were things that came to the forefront of you as you experienced that?
It was a whole new world for me. I think the number one thing I learned is that I wasn't alone. And I felt alone initially when I began, and I discovered that there were countless mothers who were just like me, needing a lifeline in some ways, and just friendship and community. And it was, even now, I think it's strange for some people to say I have friends that are online that I've never met before. 10 years ago, it was much stranger, I think.
Yes.
A little scary, but it's amazing how close you can get to people you've never met before, and the common bond of motherhood and faith and all of those things coming together. So I am very grateful. I mean, really, social media and the online world has literally changed my life, and I'm just grateful for it.
Now, not only are you in Texas, but you have a ministry that you are running across the ocean. And so I'm sure that those digital platforms and ways to connect have been really important in that. Tell us about Mercy House Global and how that began and what all your vision is for that.
Sure. So actually, it's amazing how Mercy House Global began. And when I said the online world had changed my life, that's exactly what I was referring to. About 2 to 3 years into blogging, as my blog grew and just the right place at the right time, I was invited by Compassion International to travel to Nairobi, Kenya to write and blog about poverty in the slum in an effort to get children sponsored. This was a new initiative many years ago by Compassion, and it was very effective. And I went on that trip, having never been overseas, just this middle-class mom that had a great online community, but at the same time, just personally, I felt empty, and I really just wanted purpose for my life. Blogging in and of itself is sort of egocentric. You are writing about yourself, and in most cases, and trying to get people to read that. I loved it, but at the same time, I wanted to use it for good. And so that trip, that invitation, was an opportunity for me to do that. I didn't know that it would turn my life upside down and really right side up. And it wrecked me in a way that I was not expecting. I think it was the right season for me to be receptive to really just total redemption and seeing a need and wondering if maybe I could help meet it. And so Mercy House Global really began as a response to that trip. Fast forward all these years later, not dreaming of what God would do, but it really was a response to the world's normal. It really just blew up my idea of how people live, and I didn't really know until I went on that trip. And I came home and really wanted to do something about it. So Mercy House has 3 maternity centers in Nairobi, Kenya, and the family that leads, we have an indigenous staff there. I actually met the young woman on that compassion trip. And so it's truly been an extension of that trip. And so we have the 3 maternity centers where we have very young teen moms between the ages of 12 and 16 who most have become pregnant from survival prostitution for food. And they live in those residences. And we've really focused the last 4 years very specifically on empowering their families with dignified jobs to help break the cycle of generational poverty. And so we have 7 artisan groups in Kenya where we provide jobs. They create fair trade product. And we do that in a lot of different ways. We have monthly subscription clubs that are fair trade clubs. We have retail stores. Really, fair trade product has become the way, it's the vehicle that we're using to help women out of poverty. And it's fun and amazing and really hard. Yeah. But the purpose I was looking for, I definitely found it.
Right. We'll be right back to our conversation with Kristen Welch about raising grateful kids, raising kids who have a heart to help change the world. And along those lines, I want to make sure that you know about Compassion International and what you can do to help change the life of a child. As a mom, I want my kids to understand that it's a big world out there. I want them to develop empathy and caring. I want to show them how to be proactive in making a difference in the lives of other kids in the world. And that's one of the reasons I'm so thankful to sponsor a beautiful little boy in Uganda with Compassion International. For a little over $1 a day, he's receiving physical, educational, and spiritual care. And for the kids I'm raising, they can see the difference it's making in his life through the letters he sends us and the pictures we get to see. For me as a mom, it's a win-win, and it's something you can do for your kids too. To give your kids the world, go to compassion.com/AllMomDoes. You know, I think you had a phrase that I want to unpack. I want to have you unpack for us a little bit because you've had that bird's eye view and that experience. You talked about what the world's normal is. So give us a snapshot of what the world's normal is. I think a lot of us, particularly those of us in the U.S., have this idea that most people have a couple of cars in a driveway and an air conditioning unit and a refrigerator. That's not the world's normal. How do you identify the world's normal?
Well, it's definitely not that. I think the world's normal is survival, and it's not even our definition, I think, of survival, like surviving Costco with 8 kids,
Right.
That's not the world's normal. And it's not to minimize our own struggles and challenges that we face, but I think what's so powerful about knowing that how we live isn't the way the rest of the world lives. It helps us appreciate how we live and what opportunities and the choices and the advantages that we have here. But the world's normal looks like a very tiny home with dirt floors and a tin roof if they're lucky. It's pitch black, maybe with a candle to light it. I think when it dawned on me that just really exactly what the world's normal is, I was in a home in Kenya with my children and my husband, and we were visiting one of the women that the daughter was in our maternity home. And we wanted to transition that girl back home, and our director in Kenya said, "I need to show you why we can't." And so she took us into that home. And the mother explained to us how she had sold her other children into either prostitution or slavery to help pay for the rest of the kids' food. So she basically chose 2 kids to sacrifice to help provide for the other 6. As we sat there in a very dark, oppressive home. The husband wandered in and he was drunk, and within minutes my family was in a difficult, dangerous situation with a marital dispute. We were covered in bed bugs as we sat there. I mean, I just couldn't wait to get out, and that's all I could think about is I cannot wait to get out of this house. I can't wait to get my family back to our normal.
Right.
And the minute I thought that, it was like a heavy dawning realization. This is their normal. There is no escape for them. This is every day. And I think when we understand that, it's not so that we have pity or that because we're supposed to share what we have. I think God gives us what we have so that we can share it with other people. And it was such a huge, life-changing experience for my family. And they have seen a lot and we've experienced a lot together. But it makes you grateful for what you have. And I think gratitude is just such a crucial part of the Christian life. When we are grateful for our normal, even our difficult normal, I mean, we have difficulties here, obviously, in the U.S., but when we are grateful for it, it gives us a different perspective on how we look at things.
So the echo of that 2010 trip, how has it changed your parenting? Because if I'm doing the math right, your youngest child was around, 2.5 or 3 at the time that you made that trip. So how did that change your perspective on how you wanted to parent these kids when you got this very immersive experience into the world's normal?
Yeah, I think, honestly, it wasn't this, one day realization. It was sort of a slow peeling back of the layers of exposure to the world's normal. But in that process, I realized that we had an entitlement issue in our home. And I think that most parents in America, if they're honest, feel like they have an entitlement issue in their home. I mean, it's just part of our culture. We have technology at our fingertips. We upgrade our cars and our phones and our houses constantly. It's the American dream, right? It's like something that we've been told most of our lives that we deserve. And so I realized that my kids were entitled. And then when I peel back that layer even further, I realized I had entitled them because I was entitled. So it really was this process and journey of my kids are exempling and modeling what I'm doing, and I'm entitled. That was actually a very painful season because you just have to be honest with yourself. And when you're honest with yourself, if you want to change it, you have to make changes. And so all of that it's just difficult. It's very difficult to, turn a ship that's been going in one direction. But that process of just being honest and beginning to say, no, you don't get that just because you ask for it, or you're not actually entitled to this thing that you want. And even, saying that to myself and starting to turn that ship and asking my kids to work for what they want. And just in, a long process of change. It's possible. It's not easy, but it's possible to live upstream in a downstream world.
Your new book, Raising World Changers in a Changing World, is predicated on this idea of raising kids who are generous and who do understand the beauty of sacrifice. So talk to us about the heartbeat of this new book.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this book. This is my 4th book, but probably was the one book that I was so compelled to write it. And it's not a guilt trip. It's not, you should be doing XYZ to raise a world changer. It's really about joy. And it's about the purpose that we have found by giving our lives away. And I think in our culture, we buy into this mentality that we are supposed to give our kids the world. We want to give them the world. I don't think that desire is wrong. I think we want them to be happy and successful, and we love them and we want to provide for them. But I think it's the line between those feelings and entitling them is very hard to define. And so human nature sort of takes over. And I think what's so countercultural and so amazing about this idea is we can give our kids the world by giving them a global perspective and by showing them how other people live and by giving our lives away. You know, when you think about economics and putting numbers on paper, when you give what you have, it seems like you would have less, you know, just based on math. And I think when you apply God's principle in this upside down kingdom, when you give what God has given you away and you share it with others, you don't have less, you have more. And that's really the message of this book. The joy that comes from giving your life away is profound. It's not just about money. It's about our time and our talents. If we can teach our kids that their unique gifts and their creativity and their desires and what they're good at, it wasn't given to them for them to keep and just be good at it and be proud of what they're able to do it was given to them to share with the world so that they would glorify God and change their generation. We're still in the trenches, you know, my kids are still learning and we're definitely not perfect, and I get to share some of that in the book, just reality and brokenness. But I think that giving is contagious. I think God created us with a desire for purpose and meaning, especially when you think of this new generation of kids and even the millennial generation. They're so hungry for purpose. That isn't an ungodly or worldly desire. They want what they do, what they wear, where they go to have meaning. And I think that it starts with generosity. I think there's just so much joy and countless biblical principles about what happens internally and eternally when we share what we've been given.
What do you think are the dangers of entitlement? Because, you know, a lot of times we sort of categorize it as, well, you know, entitlement, I mean, you know, somebody's kind of, I don't know, selfish or, you know, just a little self-focused, but we don't necessarily think of it as something that can be dangerous to someone's internal core. What do you see are some of the dangers of this entitlement culture?
Well, I think there are many, many dangers. Never being satisfied. And if you are not a content person, then it affects every area of your life, your marriage, your job, your bank account. And I think entitlement that is not dealt with creates people who are never content. It also just feeds this selfie mentality. 10, 15 years ago, the word selfie wasn't even a word.
Right.
You know, with our love of technology and our access to it and our need for approval with social media, we feel entitled to have that. And so I think we've become very selfish and very self-centered. We're the heroes of our own story. I mean, when you think of entitlement and we've given our kids everything they want and demand their entire childhood, we're propelling adults into the world who cannot hold down jobs, who cannot pay their bills. I read last week that 75% of parents are paying in some way, helping their adult children pay their bills.
Wow.
I mean, that's just astronomical, and that is a direct result of entitlement. And I think hard work and work ethic and this sweat of the brow and digging in and tenacity and all of these biblical characteristics that I want to see in my kids, they are not learning that when we're meeting every need and we're making life easy for them. And maybe that's the biggest danger. I remember a couple of years ago, you know how you learn on your oldest, and I probably many apologies.
Very true.
One night we were just talking and she said, "Can I ask you something?" And I sort of braced myself and I said, "Yes." And she said, "Why are you so hard on me?" And it sort of made me want to just weep, and it made me catch my breath. And I wanted to defend myself, and I realized that I couldn't. And I just said, because life isn't always easy. And if I've made everything easy for you and I've rushed to bring your lunch to school on the 7th time of forgetting it, even though I'm trying to teach you responsibility, and if I meet every need that you have and I rescue you constantly, I'm teaching you that life is easy because someone will always bail you out. And I want to teach you that life isn't always easy. Sometimes it's hard and we have to dig deep, and that even when I can't be there to help you and bail you out, God will be there. It was a really powerful moment for us because I didn't even know if I had verbalized why I had made some of the parenting choices that, and we're not mean parents. I mean, we can be, but, like having a social media free day. I mean, my kids went crazy and not in a good way when we started doing that. And it seemed like we were just being mean. Like, why can't we have access to social media or to online games or whatever, one day a week? Well, there's a reason behind that, and kids don't always understand that. But after just being consistent and making it a priority, and we brought back family game night and started doing things that were non-media related, it was good for us. And so I think that if we don't acknowledge the entitlement and try to shift that ship in some way, that there are going to be long-term, long-lasting consequences that are hurting our kids and not helping them.
It was interesting. I had an interview with Scott Hamilton a couple of weeks ago, and he's definitely beating a drum of encouraging people to really go for their best and to deal with some of the discomfort that can bring because of this very concern that if we don't train ourselves, if we don't train our kids to do the hard things and to press through, then we really have not prepared them for the world. Even a world that has a message in some ways of, well, just show up and you'll get a trophy kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. That's still really not how things work.
Exactly. And that mentality, that this trophy generation, I mean, at Mercy House, we have 15 employees, and there are times where, I feel like in order to give constructive criticism, I have to sandwich it with a compliment on either side. And it's because of this mentality. We wear our feelings on our sleeves. We're very sensitive. So as an employer, I can see already the result of raising this generation where you're special, you can do anything. And our kids are special and they can do anything. But if that's all they hear, if that's the only message they hear, then when they don't get something right, it crushes them. And so it's our responsibility to shift that balance as parents.
So in your new book, Raising World Changers in a Changing World, one of the features that you have, and I think it's part of what you were referring to even in the conversation with your oldest child, her saying, why are you so hard on me? And you having an opportunity to explain how the world really works and why this is part of your parenting. You actually have conversation starters at the end of each chapter. Tell me how that came about and how parents can use that as a tool.
So I think it was actually not initially part of the plan for this book. In the previous book that I did called Raising Grateful Kids in an Entitled World, there are conversation starters, but they're open-ended questions for you to have with your kids. Just feedback, I had heard that was helpful, but I hadn't actually asked my kids those questions. And so as I began preparing for this Raising World Changers, I think I had grown and my kids had grown, and now that I have almost 3 teenagers, we just have these amazing, very rich conversations, and they're old enough and feel comfortable enough to be honest and ask me hard questions. I remember asking my oldest if that was something she would be willing to do. And I think my kids are good writers too. The last few years they've been homeschooled, and so I've gotten to just see that they have a love for writing. And so I thought, well, I'll invite them to be a part of it. And they wanted to do it. And so I love that there are questions at the end of the book for readers to ask their kids, but they get to read what my kids answered. And it's coming from a boy's, at the time my son was a freshman in high school. So, a 13-year-old boy, an older girl, and then a younger girl. So we have a good mix of answers there. And it was fun. It really feels like it was a family project.
Now, what do you define as a world changer? Because, wow, that's a loaded little moniker right there. So how does your family and how do you as a mom, how do you unpack that for us?
Well, I think it's much simpler than we think it is. We have these fair trade shirts at Mercy House that say, I'm a world changer. And the other day someone said, I didn't want to buy that for myself because I felt like maybe I shouldn't proclaim that. And I was like, you need to let that go. I think anytime we change someone's world, we're world changers. So that could be just being kind to a kid at school or a neighbor who had a baby. I mean, anytime we put someone above ourselves, we're changing their world, their day for sure. That's the definition in my terms, would be seeing someone's need and meeting it. We are changing their world. And I mean, just this morning, I woke up to a text from someone who wanted me to know they are with me and for me, and they are for Mercy House. And when I think of a need at Mercy House, they want to be the first people that we ask to meet that need. I mean, I sobbed reading it to my husband. They changed my world today. They really encouraged me. And I think when we give away what we have, whether it's our words, our time, our resources, our talents, our money, we're changing the world. And as parents, we have to remember that the burden and the guilt, all the things we carry, that responsibility, it doesn't mean we have to take them overseas. It doesn't mean we have to start a nonprofit. I love Mother Teresa's quote that says, want to change the world? Go home and love your family. It's so powerful, that message of, yes, there are good things we can do outside of our home, but it starts inside our home, making our kids feel known and valued without giving them every single thing they want. You know, it's a hard job, definitely, but I think we're up for it.
You addressed something, we assume that maybe generosity is something, possible in every human heart, but it does seem for some people a generous spirit is an easier thing. It's a gift that they have. And for some of us, that generosity, it might not really be part of our intrinsic nature. So how do we foster that in ourselves and in our kids without being condemning? Because, I have some kids who would just absolutely hand you anything they've got in their pockets at any point, and it's not even really almost a sacrifice for them because it's just very natural to them. And then I have others who that's a tougher ask. So how do we nurture that without it feeling like a judging or a condemning or some kind of, thing that you've got to check the box?
Yeah, I think that's a good question, because with my 3 kids, I have very different dynamics. One of my kids just literally has a heart to give everything away, and I have another kid who literally has a heart to keep it all. And so I think putting one on a pedestal over the other, shaming our kids obviously is not what we want to do. I think that it's so important that we teach our kids that their passion and their skill, whatever God has given them in that realm, their passion, what they love, and what they're good at. If we teach them that those 2 things are for God's glory, and that's what they should focus on giving away. And we all have different gifts. So in the kitchen, a kid who loves to cook and bake, finding an outlet for them to share that gift with someone else that would appreciate it. Or like my son's an archer. He loves archery, and he's taken upon himself to teach younger boys who don't have a father image archery. So he gives lessons for free to a couple of boys. My daughter's not going to do that. She doesn't know how to shoot a bow. So I think if we focus on our kids' individual gifts and teach them that their passion, what they love, and what they're good at, their skill, when those things collide and we give that to God, He's glorified and we change the world.
Looking back now, and for those moms who are listening who have children who are younger, what are some things that you think are a great way to begin to instill generosity as a family culture, even if your children are very, very young and you're not sure yet what their gifts and skills are? When they're still little, what are some things that you think moms and dads can do to foster this generous culture in a family?
Yeah, I think really, and of course parents get to lead this, and which is sometimes hard, finding creative ways to do it. But I think making your family dynamic about giving, just from an early age. Of course, my youngest was like 2.5 when we started Mercy, so she doesn't know any difference. But there were little things along the way that we could do that even weren't outside of our house. How can we serve each other? What are some ways that we can give? When you pick up your toys, you're giving to mom, right? You're helping. And I think there are actually some really cool pre-order incentives if you pre-order Raising World Changers that are just free downloads. One of them is a bank that teaches kids about saving and giving. And I think there are just little things that we can do, creating a job list, a chore list, and then you're teaching your kids hard work, but you're also teaching them what to keep and what to give. And I think one of the most memorable things we did with our kids when they were younger is there was a single mom that we wanted to help with some Christmas gifts, but we wanted to do it anonymously. And so, I took my kids to the store and had a very clear conversation to begin with, because I think my youngest was like 4 at the time, that we were picking out a present for someone else. And then we went home, we wrapped it, and we put it on that single mom's front porch and rang the doorbell, and then sat in the car across the street kind of creepily and watched her open the front door, and just the surprise and the joy. And my kids still talk about that and how neat that experience was. And so there are so many ways that we can teach generosity. I think the number one thing we have to remember is we don't have to make it rocket science. It doesn't have to be this huge, epic, expensive endeavor. It's just the little things that we do. Having someone who doesn't have anyone to spend a holiday with at your house, or we've opened our home for the last 4 years to someone who had stage 4 cancer, and we share our home with them. It doesn't have to be epic things that feel world-changing. It's just weaving generosity into the fabric of our lives and looking for ways to share what we have. If it's an extra room, if it's a seat in our car, taking someone to church, these are all generous things that are, meeting their needs and making their life better.
And things that we can all do. Kristen, thank you so much for being with us today. All righty, fantastic. Well, Kristen Welch, the book is Raising World Changers in a Changing World. Thanks so much for reminding us of how simple generosity really can change the lives of people around us. Thanks for being with us today. You can learn more about Kristen, her books, her family, her nonprofit by going to wearethatfamily.com. That's wearethatfamily.com, and you can find all of her links for all of her places that she visits on the socials there at that website as well. And I want to connect with you too. I'm JulieLylesCarr.com, and then I'm Julie Lyles Carr on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Also, check out AllMomDoes.com. Fantastic group of bloggers who have all kinds of resources and insight for you on such a variety of topics, from raising your kids to how to get on those new magnetic lashes. Have you tried that? So be sure and look at AllMomDoes.com. A big thank you to Rebecca Beckett. She's our content coordinator, and Donna Toti, who is our producer. Coming up next week, we have, wow, this digital age we live in. How are we going to navigate that as parents? It just seems like a big, big, scary unknown. We've got a guest next week who's going to really help us navigate some of those waters. Her name is Casey Bree Jensen, and she has some fantastic resources for talking to your kids about being on social media, ways to begin those conversations, ideas for making social media and the online life part of your family life, but something that doesn't just take over. The safeguards, the things you need to know about, the programs that can be great, and the apps that can be really dangerous. Casey Bree Jensen has all of that information and more for us on the next episode of the Modern Motherhood Podcast. We'll see you then.